Cash-a-maniacs.
Geo Gearheads.
Hey, welcome to Geo Gearheads. This is a weekly with two E's, podcast about geocaching and geolocation games. I'm Chris in the Northwest, along with your host, Daryl W4.
Hey, welcome back to what's been a very long week. I'm not sure.
Not over yet.
Was it like 5 weeks ago that we did our last show?
Something like that. It feels that way.
Okay. So it's not just me.
No.
Everyone seems to be complaining about how absolutely insane it is. And I think a lot of it is that we've all gotten spoiled by COVID, because you can't really go and do all that normal back to school stuff. And now people are like, oh, it's back to school time.
Yeah. Daryl, just in these last couple of weeks, I have to admit, I'm starting to get kind of blue from being in the house all the time because of COVID. I want to get out. I want to do things. It's, at first it didn't bother me. I'm an introvert. I'm okay.
If only there were some kind of game that you could go out and play on your phone, kind of by yourself, off in the woods, that might answer your problems.
Pokemon.
Well, I do that too. Yes.
Hey, you know what I didn't say? I didn't say what this episode's about.
No, you didn't. Do you know what this episode's about?
It's about the blues. I'm going to sing the blues tonight. No.
Oh, I hope not.
We are going to do the opposite of the blues. We're going to do good things about what a good Where I Go and a good adventure lab looks like. And I've got one good person to bring in who's ordered some good pizza, I understand. And good to see you, MC3 Cats.
Hey, well, thanks for having me back on the show, guys. And yes, it's Thursday night is pizza night here at this house, so got my order in, so we're good to go.
So anyone who figures out where your house is knows to come on Thursday nights now for the free pizza.
Here you go. Got to find me.
I'll be broadcasting
We're geocachers.
MC3 Cat's house next week while eating.
There you go. We'll just set it up in the backyard and go with it.
Okay. And then we could watch the geocaches, because I know you've got caches around your house.
I do. There's one in the yard, so we can really have fun.
Which makes it that much easier for people to come over for the pizza.
Yeah, that's true.
And a cache.
Yeah, pizza and a cache. It's almost an event.
We can't use that word anymore.
I was going to say, are they allowed out there?
No.
Oh,
Nope.
I'm so happy because two of the regular events in this area published again today for September.
Really?
Nice.
Yeah, we've been allowed to have the events. The trouble is you're only allowed 10 people maximum in an indoor gathering
At a time or total?
total.
Okay,
Or your group.
You can't cycle through like every 15 minutes a new set of 10 people come in?
You technically, I think, could, but
Gotta have door
really wants
monitors.
to deal with that much. Yeah.
Just have an outside event. I don't care if it's raining or snowing. Have an outside event.
Well,
Yeah,
and
there you go.
that's the problem. Is have you watched any of the reports from New York with them complaining about how they're going to conduct business in a few more months?
No.
That right now in New York, you can't do indoor dining or beer bars or anything like that.
Right.
So it's all outdoors. Well, New
That-
York gets
that works
kind of cold soon.
Yeah.
So they're
But
very worried about
apparently,
that.
If you call it a riot, it's okay. You can have it. So let's have some geocaching riots. Oh, wait. Sorry.
I don't think that's how that works.
Oh, I misunderstood then, because this is what I'm seeing. And I just figured that's the way the rules of the land go. Hey, you know what? Let's talk about something else.
I think that would be best.
A cache riot. I like that.
A cache riot. I love it. It's a riot. I mean, as in something funny.
Yeah.
That's a knee slapper.
No, that's our geocaching comedy fest.
Yeah. A geo riot.
It's our cache riot. the Geocaching Comedy Fest,
I
right?
love it.
I wonder if you'd actually be able to get that through your local reviewer.
Not now, but eventually.
Well, yeah. I mean, right now you guys are at a disadvantage because you can't have any events,
Nothing.
let alone silly ones.
I think there's something going on in McMinnville, Oregon, though, this weekend, I hear.
I was
So-
down there several weeks ago. It's a wonderful place, McMinnville.
Yeah, it is. It's a cool place. They really get into their UFO festival down there.
Oh,
There's a whole story with that too,
festival.
but for another time.
I was
Yeah.
thinking Spruce Goose.
Well, there's that too. I mean, there's a lot of fun things to do down there. Wineries and
Which is kind of a UFO of a different type, isn't it?
It really is.
yeah,
It
really.
was only seen flying once, and people weren't sure what it was.
Well, I think at that point everyone knew what it was.
Oh.
Today, not so much. Which also is going to be the case with 747s before long.
Ay, ay, ay. Well, and 737s. I mean, those aren't flying anymore.
Oh no, those are all only the Max.
Only the Max.
Only
Yeah.
the Max. Those are an extinct species before they ever really flew.
You're
Yeah.
taking it to the max, man.
We are so far off topic.
I was so 80s, taking it to the max.
I thought you were gonna go Valley Guy on me and say it's Grody to the max.
Grody. About Grody. I'm going to use that now for my kids.
Wow. All right, so let's get to the actual topic rather than just
wait, we do
babbling
have
forever. Yeah.
I
Which
just thought
is,
on MC3 Cats because he's fun to talk to.
Well, it's
And-
that old problem of, we're just a bunch of friends hanging out. Who knows what you're going to talk about? It's not what you intended to, right?
Pizza.
Kind of like the meetings. Meetings at work. Do you ever talk about what you're supposed to? You always get sidetracked.
On Mondays, it's harder. By Fridays, you're focused and ready to go. But then, the week's over.
I was going to say usually Mondays and Fridays are lost causes.
Yeah.
So there it is.
I would agree with that. It's that middle part, where you're
Yeah.
most
You have
productive.
Tuesday, Wednesday, and part of Thursday.
That's the meaty
right.
part of the bell curve right there where you get work done.
Right.
Exactly.
The rest of the week is just prep for that.
Yep.
So let's
Right.
get into the
I
actual
agree with you.
topic, which is the Where I Goes and Adventure Labs. And what we're looking for is what makes a good Where I Go and Adventure Lab. And they're not the same thing. They are very different beasts. So what makes good Where I Goes and Adventure Labs?
I have no clue.
Well, this is why we have an expert.
Let's talk to the other Chris.
Well, I might be able to shed a little light on that. I've
Chris
got.
that actually knows something.
Now that was below the belt there. Jeez.
Well, you missed the fun part pre-show.
Yeah, I guess I did. Darn. But yes, they are two different beasts for sure. I mean, there's a lot of similarities obviously between the two. And probably the biggest similarity to them is you're doing things in kind of a virtual sort of world. But yet you're interacting with things in the current world or the state or the place that you happen to be in. So that's kind of where the similarities are. Well, that and there's a little bit of a creative element that goes into both adventures as well as and probably even more so with doing Where I Go cartridges and building them, because you generally need not only a theme but just a general idea, and then you have to map it out, and there's a lot more verbiage involved and planning, probably more so planning, I would say, over on the Where I Go side than there is on Adventure Labs. But you don't want to kid anybody that you do need to do planning on both of them. So I've put out I got my second lab adventure credit just about a week or two ago, and this will be my 10th lab adventure that I've put together, not over the course of the lab adventure over its existence, which I believe goes back to 2013. I built a few lab adventures under some different accounts, particularly the WSGA. I've done some for the mega events that we do for the APE event. I've even, as the outreach coordinator, I did a few lab adventures with non-geocaching entities, like the 4-H Club is a good example. I did one for them at the Washington State Fair in Puyallup. Did a interesting one there that were on the fairgrounds, and it was a limited time arrangement. But they wanted an activity for their 4-H kids to do something in between shows. So I kind of took them around, and they got to explore the fairgrounds, which is a pretty interesting place if you've not been there. So I've done things like that. Mm-hmm.
When you make them for non-geocaching entities, how are you doing that so they can get in and play these games?
So when I did that particular one, and that one was unique in that it was on the fairgrounds and it was there. I had it active during the time of the fair. Mm-hmm. So it was only a 3-week adventure, and they're doing things differently now, where when you get a lab adventure credit, it's there for at least 12 months, I think is what they're doing. So this one was a little different in that it was tied to an event. It was a non-geocaching event, but it was the 3-week, I think at that point it was the Western Washington State Fair, I think is what they were calling it back then, because this was a number of years back. So you had to buy a ticket to get into the fairgrounds, and then you could do the adventure. So that's how the geocachers got to play it. Of course, if you were a presenter or with the 4-H group and you were showing your rabbits, for instance, you were going to be at the fairgrounds for several days. And so the kids got something to do while they were, showing their rabbits or whatever.
Okay. So it was public for everyone.
It was public for everyone.
Non-geocaching group.
Right. Exactly. It was open to everybody. And that was part of the arrangement back then when we were doing them, not related to anything geocaching, is they would still get published live. And of course, back then they were actually, they didn't really have the app. You were doing everything online. They had a website that was dedicated. So this goes back a number of years before the app showed up. So it was a little different.
Before the app.
Yeah, it was BA. So, and it's a different animal, obviously, today, because there is an app and they've got the geofencing going on, which they didn't have back then when it was on the web-based version of it. Those were fun to do. I've used them as a training tool. I had one of my other outreach projects was working with teen librarians. So there was the Tacoma library system had me come and do classes on geocaching, and I actually went to 2 different libraries for it. So they were really hitting me up. So one of them I did as a training tool. I used the Adventure Labs as a way to show kids what geocaching was about. And it's a little odd because I think I even set out some actual containers for them to find, but use the lab adventure as sort of a way to introduce them to it. So I've done things like that with lab adventures. But the idea is, it's an open forum. You need a good topic, a good subject for a lab adventure. And this is, again, true for the Waragos as well. You need to have a good theme or a good idea for your adventure lab or your Warago cartridge. And what I've seen people do, and I've seen some really good ones. I think I was just looking at my at my account. I found almost 600 rather lab adventure caches, which a little surprised me when I went to check that out. I was like, oh man, I got quite a few finds for these things. So, which was good because then I got to sit down here and think about, okay, what were some great lab adventures that I have done, and what did I really enjoy about them? And I think primarily with adventure labs, it's really about where the person is taking you. It's great if they can even bring a story along. Probably one of my favorite ones I've done was right here in Renton. There was one that an actual cacher that I know pretty well. He did a story based on some public statues or art that we have in town. And it was sort of a I'm trying to find some lost friends. I can't remember the exact name of the thing, but what the two of them did is they plotted out a series of adventure caches, and they turned it into a story. And I have not seen anybody go quite to that extent. I've seen plenty of them where people take you around to a town's public art displays or murals or historical places or whatever, but they took it next step and actually turned it into a story. And so obviously there's a lot more dialogue and content that you're putting in, but you're taking basically a public art tour and you're making it a story, and you become part of that story. And I thought that was pretty awesome, because I've not seen too many people pull that off, but this was done very well. And of course I gave them 5 stars when I was done with it, because it was and in fact, one of the great things about that one is there's this dragon that I didn't even know existed in town, which is pretty bad because I go into downtown enough. I should notice these things, and I don't. So there was this dragon sitting on top of a building, and I guess it had been there for years. I never noticed the bloody thing. Well, this lab adventure pointed that out. It was one of their friends in the lab adventure that I had to go and find. And I was looking up at the building going, God, how long has that been there? Because I didn't know it was there.
Yep.
And it's a several story building. So maybe I need to be looking up instead of down at my phone more. I don't know. I may be doing more of this and not doing any of this. But there's this huge dragon, and I guess it lights up at night. The eyes glow red or something. It's cool. So I'm just like, that was sweet. So that's another plus. So not only did it take an idea that's been done before, but they sort of reinvented it, making it a story. But then they took me to a place or took me to one of these public art displays that I didn't know existed. And I got to see something new in the town. So that one really had it earned its 5 stars rating from me, because I got to see something that I have not seen in the town that I've lived in for many years.
So not only taking you to a new spot and interesting spots, but weaving the whole thing together with a story.
Yeah. I mean, I've not seen that really done. I've seen the tours where you go through, but this one was it was dialogue and it weaved in. And I thought, awesome. It was their very first adventure that they've ever put out. I think they have only found a few. They've actually done a few lab adventures, but this was their very first one that they did. And I thought it was fantastic that they took a sort of an out of the box idea and put into play with this adventure. So I think doing stuff like that makes a fantastic adventure, because you're taking something the tried and true and you're just putting your own little spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's not that you usually see the adventure labs like that. I've heard about them, but I've actually never done a story adventure lab.
No, this one was it was on it. So it definitely got a favorite point, or it got the 5-star rating for me, because it was fantastic. Another one that I liked, and it was done by a lackey, I'm pretty sure, and it's in Seattle, and it was only, I think there was just 4 in this one. But they did some multimedia in it. So, and it was, I think it's called I Spy Something with My Little Eye, or something like that was the name of it. And what they did is, it was basically kind of like, doing rhymes. So you would go to one of the labs, which I still thought was really awesome because of the location. It was over in Seattle on the Lakeside, Lake Washington side. And so you could walk this one very simply. It was very easy. You park the car and just walk the thing and you're done. So it wasn't a lot of traveling around different points. So they had it in the one neighborhood, and one of them it was called Something Red. And it took you to a telephone booth, but it was like a London telephone booth. And you couldn't go in it. I think it was locked, but you didn't have to go in it. So the person basically gave you a riddle. And so you got to the location. You're standing at this London phone booth, and you got a video clue. And basically the clue, they gave you the clue, or the riddle, I should say, and then the question came after. And it had to do with, of course, I forget what the thing was. It had something to do with what? Trying to remember how it went, but it had something to do with the telephone. So it said, what has rings but no fingers, or something like that. And you're standing in front of this London phone booth, and and the answer was a telephone ultimately. And that was the answer. But I thought that was really awesome how that one was done, because not only was it a riddle, which I've not seen a riddle-based adventure done, but they incorporated that location, that red phone booth, which is unique in and of itself. You just don't see London phone booths in Seattle. You just don't. So you had that, and then and then the video clip, which was really cool. It had this head talking to you. It wasn't like Max Headroom, if you know who that is, from the 80s. But it was,
I do.
I know you do. If you were born in 1990s, you would have no clue. Anyway, so you had this talking head that would tell you the riddle, and then you had to answer the question. It was really well done, and I like that one too. It was short and sweet, but again, took me to a place that I wasn't totally familiar with, which that part of town I wasn't, and it took you to some interesting locations, and the riddles were pretty awesome. It's another one I would highly recommend folks do if you're in the area.
Very cool. Now, this one doesn't sound like one that should necessarily be a linear experience, though. The first one, the story, is definitely one that would be.
Yeah, I think that one you had to do in a certain order. And they did not have a bonus cache with that. And we'll talk a little about bonus caches. So I think that bonus caches are a great idea. This particular one in downtown here was not. You just had to go and find the 5 friends because they got scattered or lost. I'm trying to remember the theme of how they got disconnected, but you had to go and find them. So you just, plotted around the town, and some of the public art I was familiar with, but like I said, the dragon, I had no idea was there. There was one where there's a little boy sitting, a bronze statue of a little boy sitting next to the entrance to the public library, and he was reading a book. And he had a little baseball and a baseball mitt on the floor, on the ground next to him. And so they posed a question, and you had to answer it, but it was well done. Again, well done. Bonus caches, I think, are great. And I've seen some people do some different twists with bonus caches. I've seen them where as you go through and you find the adventure, and then you look at the congratulation note that you get after, they'll put the coordinates or something in. Another one, a couple of them I've done up north, where you would get words. So at the end, you would get a code word. So you do all 5, and you'd have 5 code words. And then you would have to go into the geochecker on the bonus cache and put those 5 words in. And I've seen people do it a little differently, where you have to put them in the order that you receive them. So those would be linear ones. Or another version is where they'd say, put them in alphabetical order. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to put the words in the geochecker by alpha. So I've seen those 2 versions done. I'm not sure. The one I'm going to the one I'm going to put out is going to have a bonus cache. The first one I put out did not, but it's in a really cool town. So I made mine more about the location, because the town of Leavenworth, Washington, if you're not familiar, it's kind of a touristy trap, sort of, but it's a cool touristy trap.
It's nothing like Leavenworth, Kansas.
No, there's no big military prison there, but there is a really cool Bavarian village there. So it's definitely worth a trip if you're in Central Washington. So it takes the whole Bavarian theme to the nth degree. So all the buildings and everything look like they were stolen out of German countryside somewhere. But it's really neat. And they have some wonderful murals painted on the buildings. And so I made that adventure more about the murals because I thought the artwork was just phenomenal. And it captures the whole, Bavaria sort of, lifestyle and theme and everything. So that, again, I thought that was a good idea for an adventure. It gets people into this really neat town. A lot of these things that we do are about the locations, particularly lab adventures really are, where it goes to a point, but they're more about just being creative and building virtual reality experiences and that kind of thing.
Does
Well,
your,
I think sorry.
does your Where I Go in Leavenworth mention Woody Goomsba?
Funny that you should mention that, because my original plan for that one was to go multimedia and have video clues where Woody Goomsba or a lookalike would be presenting that. And I started looking into that. I'm just like, oh, this is going to be really hard. And then I thought, well, because it's in the foothills of the Cascades on the east side, I started to be a little concerned about connectivity. And that's one thing you definitely need to keep in mind when you are doing an adventure. Where it goes, you don't really have to worry about that so much, but adventures, oh gosh, yes. If you don't have good connectivity, that's going to be a problem for folks trying to do your adventure lab. So I was really kind of leaning in that direction. I thought, oh, gee, look where it's at. I don't typically have cell coverage issues in Leavenworth, but somebody else might. So I'm like, let's not do that. Let's just keep it simple. So I kind of shied away from doing the multimedia little videos that would give you the clues and that kind of thing. So something to keep in mind when you're building an adventure is, there's places I would love to do an adventure in the state, and I know darn well that you're in the back areas of Washington, and it's like people are going to have a hard time doing it.
Right. And that's not something you can cache like you can, with a series of geocaches. You could cache them to your phone and off you go.
Right. You can download queries and that kind of thing. And if you're going old school with a GPS unit, you're tight because it's on the phone, because it's an app. You have to have cell coverage to do adventures. And that may be the biggest downside of adventures is it's going to limit you to areas that are going to have good coverage. And there's lots of places in this country that are essentially black holes where there just isn't a lot of cell coverage. And maybe Verizon will have a tower in the boondocks, but maybe T-Mobile isn't have one in that same area. So it's going to appease to certain people who are going to be able to do your adventure versus others that are going to be locked out. And me personally, if I'm going to put an adventure out, I'm going to put the time and effort. I want anybody who wants to go find it, go do it, and not have connectivity challenges. It's if I'm going to do the effort, I want everybody who wants to go do it. Hey, go for it. It's in an area where you're going to be able to finish it. And especially if I'm going to do it, tie it to a bonus cache at the end, you got to be able to finish the adventure to get the secret, super secret codes to figure out, where the cache is. So yeah, so those are probably the biggest challenges, but also the biggest pluses with adventures. I love looking at the critiques of it afterwards, and those are always pleasant. One of the things I really wish adventures had was some sort of an email system where when somebody completes it and they do their critique, that you get notified of that. And I imagine at some point they're going to address that issue. Because as a lab adventure owner, I like to see how people are reacting to the adventure. If there's a problem with one of my stops on my adventure, I want to know about it so I can go and take care of that thing. And I actually had this. Here's another one. I had this happen when I was up in Anacortes. I had an adventure that went around the town. And again, another area that I hadn't spent a whole lot of time in, so it was pretty slick in that I got to see parts of the town that I would not have normally seen. So I went to this one adventure cache in this park. And first of all, the park was pretty cool. It was done in a mosaic of different types of rock. And so all the walls, there was like a little mini amphitheater that had all this cool rock work done on it. And so I went there, and they're talking about a cannon. You have to find this cannon, and the coordinates took me to a spot that didn't have a cannon in it. And I'm like, So I'm looking around, and I spot some construction cones, and they had stuck printed a couple of signs and laminated them, and it indicated that the cannon had been removed. And actually there was a picture of a crane lifting the thing out of the park. And it turns out they had removed the cannon just a couple of days after the adventure started, because they took it to renovate it. I guess it was getting rusty, which isn't a surprise in Washington. So it was removed for repair. And the adventure owner had that was one of the stops. And I think that one also had a bonus cache. So that was really a bad deal, because you weren't going to be able to get the bonus cache now because there was an adventure missing. So I pinged the CEO and just said, hey, I have some bad news for you. I said, yeah, one in this park is missing. You might want to change it, because it looks like the cannon's going to be out of the picture for a while. And I even took it a step further and grabbed some coordinates for the owner of this really cool plaque that was on this stage, this amphitheater that was in the park, that was really close to where the cannon was. And this plaque had a ton of information. And I said, here, this would be a good alternative for you if you guys want to use that. Here you go. Here's the coordinates, and here's a picture of the plaque. And if you want to, change it, go for it. So I helped the owner out. I felt bad. She had just put the thing out, and a few days after, and who would have thought that the city was going to remove the cannon?
Yeah, it happens.
That's a shame. But you're such a nice fellow cacher to say, here's the solution.
Yeah, because I thought, well, they put the time and effort to tour around all these interesting areas of the town, and the park was great. I love the park. In fact, one of my caching buddies actually grew up in this town, and thankfully he had the code for that, so I could finish it. But then so I was asking him, I said, "This is a really cool park." He goes, "Yeah, it's been like that so as long as I can remember." And I thought, this is really a cool park. So I said, but the cannon's gone. And because I knew he did it. And so I was asking him, I said, where's the cannon? He goes, well, it's right there. You can't miss it. I'm like, yeah, I can. It's not there. He's like, well, that's weird. So anyway, I love that park. And I thought, well, they need to keep one here. So here's an alternative. Whether they use it or not, I mean, I wasn't too concerned. I just was trying to help them out.
GSM times 2 says that's one nice advantage to Adventure Labs is that they can be changed very easily, opposed to where it goes, which are more difficult to change in his experience.
Oh, absolutely. Because that, with where it goes, of course, you're writing cartridges and you're developing them. And that means having to go back in and change whatever it is in the cartridge you need to change. And then you have to turn around and upload the updated version of the cartridge onto the wherigo.com website so that the next person that comes along that wants to do your Wherigo now has the updated cartridge. And so, of course, the person who tried to do it before that had, before the change was made, they got to now turn around and download the updated version. And so, yes, trying to change Wherigos is a little bit more of a challenge. And since it's a nice little segue, and thanks, Scott, for that, we can segue right into Wherigos. So with them, again, creativity is everything. I personally, I kind of really like more of the virtual ones where the cartridge really is really the meat and potatoes of the Wherigo cache, where you're going on an adventure. So again, kind of like Adventure Labs, but it's completely and utterly virtual. The latest one I did is very much like that. You're going into a park. The app is the cartridge rather, you're just being consumed into the cartridge. So everything that you're playing is right there on the cartridge. You're going to go around and you're going to be immersed in this mini adventure. And what's nice about it is at the end of that adventure, there's going to be a cache. You're going to be rewarded with a cache. And that's really what a Wherigo is. So it's sort of a combination of a lab adventure cache, maybe several of them if you've got a lot of waypoints, which I usually have those. Having one waypoint and finding the cache at the end isn't really it's not really a Wherigo. you gotta have a story or something to immerse the player in. One waypoint isn't enough.
And a quick note on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
With the Wherigo caches, you do have to have a physical cache place.
Oh yeah.
With the Adventure Labs, the physical cache is optional. So if you're doing it in a park, for instance, where you're not allowed to place a physical container, you won't be able to do the full Wherigo in the park, whereas you could do a full Adventure Lab.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a big enough, Central Park in New York, geez, you could probably do a couple of lab adventures in that park. It's huge. And there's a lot of things to check out and see there. So you could have a blast doing adventure labs there and then have a reward for somebody at the end of the day when they have completed it. And same with Wherigo. You could do the same thing with a Wherigo, except a big difference is you're doing the programming versus using the builder, the lab adventure builder, which pretty much pre-fills a lot of that stuff for you. All you're just including the art, the photographs, the coordinates, and you're putting up you're writing up a dialogue for the entire thing and for each adventure that you, or each lab cache that you have inside it, and then of course the code word and all that stuff. Whereas with Wherigo, you're doing it all. You are it. You're providing the photographs. You're providing the verbiage. You're doing the programming again, depending on which builder you're using. As we've talked about in the past, some are easier than others. The ones that are a little more intricate, they reward you with more functionality, which is really, I've really enjoyed doing the next level up from the kit one, where you can have things like items that you have to pick up as you're going on your journey through the cartridge. But I think the idea is having what I try to do with the ones that I've put out is looking at a location and trying to sync an idea that would fit within that location. If you're doing something completely virtual in your Wherigo cartridge, because you can do it where you interact with something in the park, if it's a statue or some some piece of public art or whatever it's in that particular park. You can do that, obviously, and make it kind of like an adventure, lab cache type thing. But with a Wherigo, I mean, you can do so much more. You can come up with characters that you just think up of and go into a storyline and have these rich dialogues that you as the player would interact with, let's say a wizard, if you're doing some sort of medieval themed cartridge, and you're the adventurer, you're the hero, and you have to go and find the missing treasure, and so you're out in this park and you're interacting, virtually with these different characters that you've made up. I mean, you can do that kind of stuff, and the cartridge builders will allow you to have at it, and those dialogues, those interactions with those virtual characters. You can literally sit there and draft up and write this immense dialogue where you as the player have to input some sort of a response to the virtual character's question or whatever they're posing to you. So that's where the Wherigo experience just completely blows away the adventure side, because it's so much more interactive. And it could be incredibly creative. And I mean, you could, really the sky's kind of the limit on what you can do with these. And then the reward at the very end is finding that hidden treasure. If you're on a treasure quest, kind of a thing. I kind of did one sort of like that, though it was I used the kit program, but it was a Pokemon version, where you're interacting with a couple of the different Pokemon characters. So there wasn't a ton of dialogue. There was a little bit when you would walk down the trail and run into one of them. But I could go and rebuild that one, and I could use a different builder program, and I could turn that into, an epic kind of especially where I have this location. I mean, there's enough biking trails in this area that I could turn this into, a 20 or 30 waypoint, cartridge. And I'd probably get a few people teed at me for that, but
it's worth it. Do it.
But I warn people up front, and that's another good point. If you're creating a Wherigo cache, on the cache page, it's a good idea to kind of let people know what they're getting into. And I like to try to do that, especially for the newbie cachers. And I know there's been quite a few of them since COVID that have been coming out and getting into the game. I like to try to let them know, hey, this is not your grandfather's geocache, right? You're not going to just go to the coordinates and find it. Oh no, I'm going to take you on a virtual trip. Okay, so and it's going to require you to download a few things, and you have to put this player on your phone, and you got to download this cartridge, and So I like to let people know up front, especially if they've never done one. But also, for those that are more seasoned, that been doing this for a while, I like to let them know, hey, look, you're looking at putting a little time in here. This might be an hour, it could be 2 hours, maybe walking a little bit. So I think that sets the stage so that the cacher comes and looks at your cache page, and they really want to try a Wherigo, or maybe they need one for a challenge. I've had a number of people ping me here lately. Oh, we're out doing Wherigos today because we're trying to do a challenge. I'm like, all right, good for you. So, letting them know what they're getting into. Yeah, this is going to take you an hour, no problem. Or it's a half hour. Or, you know what? You're going to be walking probably, 3/4 of a mile, and you're going to be walking through these spaghetti tangle of bike trails in this area. Plan accordingly.
Well, and people do have an expectation with the Wherigos that you're going to be doing more for that one find than you would have for like an adventure lab.
Right.
Because people are going to get upset with an adventure lab that's like that.
Yeah, and I think, and the same would go there too. In fact, that the description page of an adventure lab, where you sort of introduce your adventure to the cachers that are going to come to it, you want to let them know, hey, you can walk this in an hour, or you could walk it, but you really should drive it because you're covering a lot of territory, and that's one of the things that HQ actually recommends when you're doing your write-up of your adventure. That first page that people see, you're giving that introduction. That's a great time to explain to the finder what they're getting into. And so if somebody's passing on the freeway and they see you've got an adventure in this little town, hey, I need a leg stretcher. This is perfect. So they could pull off, come into town, maybe grab some lunch, and then go do your adventure, and then get back in the car and off you go. I mean, but they know that versus, yeah, this is going to take you a while. You're going to have to go to this business, and you're going to have to look for this, and it may not be available at certain time. Don't do that. Don't do that. Make it available so that you can find the code any time of the day. Don't put all these little strings attached kind of thing, because it's not fun. And the idea is anybody that does an adventure wants to complete it. That's the point. Hey, I got 5 caches here. I can find 5 caches in maybe 30 minutes that I probably could not do back home, because I've got the area cleaned out. And for me to go and find 5 caches means I'm driving 25 miles to find an area that has 5 caches. So let the person know what you're up against. If you can do it in a half hour and you can do it on foot, sweet. If not, now you're going to have to park on one end of the town, maybe do a few over there, and then drive to the other side of the town and then do the others. Let them know that, so that their expectation going into it is pretty straightforward. They know what they're getting into. And the other thing with labs is a lot of times people are, they maybe not been to the town before. They don't have the geocaching.com site to look up and see what they're getting into. This is all on the app. Yes, you see the little dots on the map, but they don't know that town usually, especially if it's somebody that's from out of town, and they're driving on the interstate and they see this really cool adventure they want to try. Give them a little heads up on what they're in for. How long does it take to do it? Can you walk it? Can you bike ride it? Is it bike rideable? Can you bring your dog? Those sorts of things. Yeah.
That is great advice. Let them know what they're getting into before they start it.
Yeah, because you keep in mind, you don't have the geocaching.com website where you can, because that's what the cache pages are for. Hey, here's the inspiration for this cache. This is going to bring you to XYZ Park. These are the, daylight, hours only to get this cache. But you have that medium to provide that information. It's with a lab adventure, you've got the app, and that's it. You got the builder, and then you got the app. So, you need to provide that information so that the cacher doesn't show up at midnight and they can't get that last cache because the park's closed, for instance. So they can find 4 out of 5 lab caches. Yeah, it sounds like a dental commercial. 4 out of 5 dentists. No.
4 out of 5
anyway.
lab caches approved.
Right. Or can be obtained after 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, so I think for both instances, again, giving the cacher, the end user, if you will, give them that information up front so they know what they're getting into, so that you don't get those nasty grams later where you get a big fat DNF on your Where-A-Go, and someone's frustrated because they couldn't finish it because of whatever the issue is, if it was a timing issue, or and the same with the lab adventure as well. Be cognizant if you're doing things particularly in parks, because they do have hours of operation, and a lot of them tend to say, park closes at dark. So you might want to include that information in either your Where-A-Go write-up on your cache page, or over on the lab side or the adventure side. Same thing. but include that just so that people don't get ticked off because they can't finish, can't do the lab adventure all the way through or finish your Where-I-Go cache.
Back to the physical caches real quick. Forest Ghost says, I'm working on a Where-I-Go and adventure in a national park right now where they only allow virtual locations in the park. And then I will put the physical cache nearby at locations outside of the park.
That is fantastic.
Which is the way that should work. But I would suggest if you're going to do that kind of stuff, make sure that people understand, because national parks tend to be a little bit larger as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that this is the case for this one specifically, but set those expectations so that people know that they're going to have to get in their car and drive out of the park to go get the final.
Yeah. The cache is not. I mean, that would be like one of the first things I put on the page. The cache is not. Well, cache is not the listed coordinates. I mean, that's between unknown mysteries and Where-I-Go's. That should be one of the first. Just again, because you don't know who's reading those pages. You may have a newbie cache that may not understand what a Where-I-Go is, or a mystery cache, and they may think, "Oh, the cache is there." Well, it's not. So they need a little education there. I mean, again, seasonal caches or season caches will know. Your newbies may not. So think of it as a little bit of an education. And again, if you're starting a Where-I-Go in a national park, you definitely want to make that very clear. And again, there may be hours restrictions on something like that as well, depending on, if you're including a visitor center as part of it. Maybe Smokey Bear is a statue in front of a visitor center, and maybe that thing is closed at a certain time, and they pull Smokey inside. Maybe he's on wheels, roll him back in so he doesn't get damaged. So if you have something like that where the item that you need to interact with is not out in the general public for all hours of the day or night, you may want to include that information, because that's really helpful.
And Forrest Ghost says, yes, for sure. I've gotten complaints when I did that before and they had to walk far from the virtual area.
Yeah. So you just, the final to this Where-I-Go is not, it. I mean, obviously they still have to follow the placement rules, which is same as a mystery cache or a puzzle cache. It's within a 2-mile radius of where the listed coordinates are. That should be a given. Everybody should kind of know that, with the exception of maybe the more newer cachers may not know that sort of thing. But it's a good reminder.
GSM times 2 wants to know which player you believe works best and does not crash. And that's Where-I-Go, of course.
So the one that I have had the most success and the most I've used the most is definitely the Where-I-Go kit. Universally, that works with regardless of which smartphone you're carrying with you. I've had excellent responses to folks carrying Androids versus the iPhones. So it works quite well. But keep in mind, the Where-I-Go kit is your entry-level Where-I-Go cartridge builder program. I won't say it's foolproof. I won't say it's idiot-proof necessarily, but it's a lot more forgiving. Let's put it that way. So I do like that one. And the latest one I did, I used a slightly different. I did a different platform, but it's a lot more intensive, a lot more programming. And so far, I've had, I'm not sure how many people have done it so far, but I just had a husband and wife team do it. They were doing it for a challenge, and they picked the one in the park here near my house. And that one was completely all virtual. It was a story based. You were helping a GOA cacher. That was the name of the guy that I made up. GEO space. Anyway, so you had to go find the note cards that had the missing coordinates that got blown around the park. He had them in his hand, and he was trying to place his cache, and then the wind just. and blues note cards all over this park. So that's all the waypoints where you had to go around to each. You had to go find all these missing note cards that had numbers on them. So that one was much more intense because it required you to literally go and grab these virtual note cards that had the numbers on them. So that one was much more intensive, much more programming. But so far, I've had, and I told people up front when I wrote the cache page up, I made it very clear: this is a different builder program I'm using. I've tested it numerous times on my iPhone, and I've had no problems with it. But I don't carry an Android, so I cannot tell you how the experience is going to be with an Android. So, if there's a problem, let me know. And so far, I've not everybody's been able to complete it. So,
Well,
again, I think testing is everything.
That's a good segue into Scott's question. So that's on the builder side. He was wondering about the player side. You used where I go, where you go,
Oh,
or
gotcha.
Geo go, because they all end with go.
So for me, I have an iPhone, so I use the Where I Go player app, and that works. I've really had I don't think I've had really too many problems with it, regardless of which builder program that the cartridge was done on.
Mm-hmm.
This seems to run really well. Unlike the old Oregon that I have stashed away somewhere that I don't dust off, the player on that was just atrocious. It would frequently freeze up and die in the middle of a cartridge, and that's probably the most frustrating thing you can do as a Where I Go player. A finder is to be in the middle of one and just have it crash on you. But I have not seen that happen with the Where I Go for the iPhone. And I as for the Android, I know a lot of folks that use the Where You Go one. I know there was another one that somebody was telling me about. It was another Android one. And it was a newer version, I guess, a different version of the Where You Go, but it was done by a different developer, and they really liked it. But he played that cartridge over here at Cascade, and he actually ran it. He ran the Where You Go app. He played he tested both of them, which I thought was great because I had not anybody do that. But Jim tried them both out. He did the Where You Go one and then the newer one, and I can't remember what the name of it was. And he was telling me the differences between how the cartridge player interacted with the different waypoints. And so he was saying, it seemed like the Where You Go one was a little more spot on. So it seemed like when I got right into the zone, I could see my virtual player going into the zone. It seemed to interact better on the Where You Go, and then there seemed to be a lot more lag on this other player, the newer one. So I thought first of all I thanked him for doing that because I wasn't familiar with these players because I don't have an Android, so why would I be familiar with them? So he tested that out, and I thought that was pretty awesome. So I would say Where You Go for the Androids, and and then just the Where I Go one for the iPhone folks.
All right.
Great.
Well, we are running kind of long, so why don't we wrap it up? Did you have any last minute thoughts that you want to share? No,
I just think, try to think out of the box on the Adventure Labs. Get creative. I mean, this is the Adventure Lab. What's nice about that is everybody who's requested is going to pretty much get credit if you haven't already. So this is your chance to be creative. I mean, not everybody can build a Where I Go cartridge, but the Lab Adventure is really a lot more user friendly, and you don't necessarily need to have a programming sort of mind. You don't have to worry about building waypoints and all that stuff.
All that messy stuff that Where I Go requires. So be creative. Think out of the box. Try something. Test it. Have a friend test out your Lab Adventure. That's another thing that people should do is
And I just did one up at Roslyn, which is another neat little town in central Washington that a well-known local cashier put out. If you're at all familiar with the show Northern Exposure, it was supposedly, filmed up in that area, even though the town was supposed to be in Alaska. But it was filmed in the town of Roslyn. And it's a neat little town. And the mural for the Roslyn Cafe is there on one of the buildings. And so he built the adventure around the town, and it was so well done. The questions and the answers were spot on. You didn't have to hunt and peck. So I would say if you're going to do one for the first time, be creative. Make sure that the questions really only have one answer at the location that you're at. Don't make the poor cashier try to hunt and peck and find something. Make it try to be clear and concise with your questions and your answers. That's going to make a very happy experience for the end user that is out doing your adventure. That would be probably the best advice I think I can give anybody on adventures.
All right. Thank you so much. And of course, we'll have the link in the show notes to your profile so people can find all your Where I Goes and whatnot.
Got to come to Washington now.
This is true.
They're not out of the state. Yeah. Not yet.
Which right now I'm not going to be able to do for a while. So,
traveling can be a little bit of a challenge, especially by airplane. You really got to take a chance with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Wear that mask for 3 hours.
At least.
Yeah, or more, depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again. And next week, we've got our randomized show. So if you have anything that you want to talk about, then email us at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com. Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the Geo Gearheads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through a link at our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. Geo Gearheads is produced by Chris Sofenauer and Daryl Wanberg. This show is copyright 2020 by Daryl Wanberg. All rights reserved.